podcasts.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. General Motors is stopping the allocation of products to 5 of its North American plants next year as it considers whether to shut them down. WDET's Brianna Tinsley has more.
GM says in a statement the decision came as demand for smaller cars is declining and demand for SUVs is rising. Michelle Krebs is the executive analyst for Autotrader.com. She says that the move does not necessarily mean closure for all the plants.
There's a possibility that during next year's union negotiations with the UAW that there could be some negotiating for new product going into some of these plants that have been announced as closing.
Krebs says GM's decision is part of a plan to get ahead of an expected downturn in sales. She says the automaker is also looking to cut costs as it focuses more on autonomous and electric vehicles. For NPR News, I'm Brianna Tinsley in Detroit.
The State Department is condemning what it calls Russia's aggressive actions in the Black Sea. It's urging Russia to return to Ukraine the vessels and sailors the Russians have captured. NPR's Michelle Kellerman has more.
The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, says Ukrainian ships were heading from one Ukrainian port to another through the Kerch Strait Sunday when Russia rammed them and fired on them.
This is no way for a law-abiding, civilized nation to act.
Russia and Ukraine blame each other for the confrontation, and President Trump says he's not happy.
We do not like what's happening either way. We don't like what's happening, and hopefully it'll get straightened out. I know Europe is not, they are not thrilled. They're working on it too. We're all working on it together.
Trump is expected to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin at an upcoming G20 summit. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
President Trump says he's read parts of a new U.S. government report that projects climate change will cost the economy billions by the end of the century. Speaking at the White House today, Trump telling reporters while he thinks the report is, quote, fine, he's less certain about the severe economic impact being forecast, saying, I don't believe it. Trump also said at least some of the problem is a result of other countries' actions.
Right now we're at the cleanest we've ever been, and that's very important to me. But if we're clean, but every other place on earth is dirty, that's not so good. So I want clean air, I want clean water, very important.
Trump announced last year he would withdraw the U.S. from the 2015 Paris deal to combat climate change. He also has rolled back some Obama-era environmental and climate protections, allowing for increased production of fossil fuels. After a 6-month journey, NASA's Mars InSight spacecraft made a successful landing today on the Red Planet. NASA last landed on Mars in 2012 with the deployment of Curiosity. InSight will do a number of experiments over a 2-year mission. On Wall Street, the Dow is up 348 points. This is NPR. In what has become something of an ongoing annual message, Pope Francis today attacked, in his words, the sickness of consumerism, which he called the enemy of generosity. During his morning homily on what is deemed one of the world's busiest online shopping days, Francis also called on the faithful to give something to the poor. Francis made no mention of the holiday, but his plea for generosity will likely be repeated in coming weeks. The pontiff essentially saying those with plenty of possessions should give some of those to the less fortunate. For the first time, scientists say they've created genetically modified human babies. NPR's Rob Stein has an update on the latest development.
A scientist at the Southern University of Science and Technology of China says his team created genetically modified twin girls using a powerful new gene editing technique called CRISPR. The scientists modified human embryos to try to protect the babies from ever getting infected with the AIDS virus. The claim has not been verified by any independent scientists, but immediately drew widespread condemnation. Even scientists who favor editing human embryos to prevent disease say the step is premature and irresponsible, and some fear it could open the door to designer babies. Rob Stein, NPR News.
A new streaming service being offered by Fox called Fox Nation is targeted at people who want more opinion with their news. It's set to launch this week. Fox becomes the latest TV news operation to launch what amounts to its own digital initiative via subscription-based service. Fox hopes loyal fans will pay $6 a month for the streaming service. I'm Jack Speer, NPR News.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Pride. I'm Denise Pridemore, your host. And I'm talking to David from, Paranormal Frequencies. We're going to talk about that. So
Okay.
what got you started with Paranormal Frequencies, doing your I don't know, I don't want to call it a podcast because it's not really a podcast because it is
Yeah.
live.
Yeah. I mean, for basics, we'll just call it a podcast. It just came up out of boredom, really. Uh,
Well, that's how a lot of things happen.
Yeah. 2.5, 3 years ago, I think Jeremy is a former member of Fourth State Paranormal, but he and I, we just decided that we were going to start doing this, and so we started doing it on where did we start? I think we started on Blog Talk Radio, and we were just doing like the free thing where you get 30 minutes free, and we were just going at it like that, and then we decided that hey, let's just pay $40 and we'll just go on for however long we want to go on and do what we want to do. So started doing that, and then eventually, like, I was about to stop doing the show, and John stepped in, and then Jeremy stepped out, so I stepped in for Jeremy, and John and I, we'd been doing the show for the last 2 years, and we'd bounced around from like Blog Talk to Podbean, and finally, and we were on Paranormal Warehouse for a while, but then we just went to our own Facebook page because we kind of like the smaller audiences. We like the intimacy of knowing our viewers and listeners. So, and we didn't want to be like, no offense, like all the other podcasts where every weekend it's a guest. We wanted to explore these different subjects or topics in the paranormal field and kind of touch on some conspiracy stuff, and we just wanted to have discussions and just kind of, I don't know, kind of have some fun with it. We talk about some fun.
Well, I know you guys do, because I mean, like I said, you guys talk about all kinds of different things and in a very educated manner. It's not random.
Yeah,
sometimes you go off on a random tangent.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not very productive, but
No.
but that's just how you guys get sometimes.
Sometimes we get so loopy sometimes, and it makes for a good show, but like you said, the research that we do, we try to bring something to the table that's not just our opinions. We want to bring what we found to the table and let people make up their own opinions on the subject based off of what we found. We'll still offer our opinions, and if people want to take it, they can take it. If not, that's fine. But we try to mix it up. Every once in a while, we'll have a guest. I think this year we've probably had like 4 guests on the show total.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we do a guest, there's usually a really good reason behind it. So,
well, like I said, I had seen on TV the whatever it was in the 1950s in the
outlaw
Russian.
fest.
Yeah, I saw all that on TV. Just randomly one day, Ron was switching around on TV. He goes, "Denise, you gotta come and see this," and he paused it. And so he ended up taping it, and we ended up watching all of it because he knows I'm not real big into cryptozoology.
Right.
But again, this was a little bit too. You couldn't ignore that this happened. There was that these people died, and there was no proof that anybody, actual human, went after them.
For those that don't know what we're talking about, 1959 at the Dyatlov Pass in Russia, there was 9 hikers who died on the mountain, but when they found the bodies, some of them showed increased decay. Some of them were putting off radiation. Half of them weren't wearing clothes that they should have been wearing. Like, this is in the middle of winter, there's snow on the ground. Some of them were found yards away from the tents where there's no footprints. But
the tents were cut from the inside out.
Yeah, there's a lot of peculiar facts about the incident, and one of the things that come up about the incident was on a more plausible scale was that the Russians were doing nuclear testing up there, and I just did an article this past Sunday in our news section that they found an impact crater less than 2 miles away from where the hikers were found. So the guy that found it discovered it on Google Earth. He's going to go explore it in the spring when the snow melts. But it really fits in with the theory that the Russians were doing this testing, and they went up on the mountain and found the hikers and everything, and or what was left of the hikers, and either executed the rest or covered it up in some form or fashion. But there's also people talking about how it could have been UFOs because of the radiation and the way the bodies were presented and laid out, the specific locations they were found, and then the documentary goes into the Russian Yeti being the culprit. So there's this wide conspiracy trail that people can follow, and it's a very fascinating case.
Kind of makes you wonder also if, could it possibly be they were getting too close to something that the Russians were trying to hide?
Yeah, which would have been the nuclear testing, because you think in 1959, that's getting around the time of the Cold War. So, I'm sure they want anybody to know they're testing nuclear weapons.
Right. So, we don't know what it was. Is there any idea when this impact crater came into existence, or they're just guessing?
I think the guy's just guessing. Like I said, he basically found it on Google Earth, and right now, of course, is covered in snow, but he's planning on making a trip out in the spring of next year to check it out. So
where's he located at approximately?
I think he's in Russia. I'd have
I was gonna say, because if you were to say, hey, Russian government, I want to go check out Dyatlov Pass, I'm guaranteeing that they're going to say your visa's denied.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you live in the area for a good reason. You'd have to have a damn good reason to be going. So.
Yeah, this is the Uri Mountains, and the only civilizations are like these really small villages that are kind of cut off from everybody. So
right, and those people were telling everybody that there was something up there. Kind of made you think of the movie The Village, where they tell everybody that there is something out there, and we don't leave the village, we don't go out there. Yeah,
pretty much.
And of course, I'm going to tell you right now, anybody out there, I don't like the movie The Village. It irritates me to no end.
That movie was so predictable.
It made me mad. Okay, it made me mad. That they thought that their kids could be that gullible,
right?
To believe that, but that's a whole other story. M. Night Shyamalan is a really good director to get people to believe his stuff, but that's a whole other thing. What was one of the most unique things you guys researched for paranormal frequencies?
Oh, that's easy. It was the Lizzie Borden case. We did a 6-week show on the Lizzie Borden trial. There was this journalist who had come across the case files, and it had like the court transcriptions, and it had all the information from the case, including like stuff about the evidence and everything. And this person was writing out this long report or this long article. So we basically followed that article, and we would go into some of the actual transcripts from the case, the Lizzie Borden case, the trial. And we were analyzing the whole thing ourselves. And, to find out just, what happened during the trial, like in the courtroom, things that were said in the courtroom, the way people were behaving. And it was so bizarre at points, and it was so fascinating on the other end, because you're talking about this infamous murder, but yet in a case like, Villisca, there's so many things that don't add up, that it's like, it seemed like they were trying to make things fit when they shouldn't, just so they could come